Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I see lots of people joining the room. Good to see you. So I'd like to welcome everybody this evening to the Reflection and Exploration of Responsive Curriculum session. It's a workshop that is jointly organized by Peach through the Dr. Seuss Foundation. And we like to start each of our workshops with a land acknowledgement from Dr. Sandy. Dr. Sandy, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Escalate, new Sandy Konaptewa Dixon, new Hopitu, new Mokopi, new Dawawa, new So'o. My name is Dr. Sandy Konaptewa Dixon. I am Hopi. I am from the village of Mokopi, and I am San Clan. I'm also faculty at Cal Poly Pomona. And also part of that is we always say we're So'o, which is I am a grandmother. I'd like to go ahead and share the land acknowledgement that we use here at Cal Poly Pomona. We recognize that we gather on the territory and ancestral lands of Native California Indians. Cal Poly Pomona acknowledges the Gabrielino Tongva people as the traditional land caretakers of Tavangar, the Los Angeles Basin, and South Channel Islands. We also acknowledge that this land remains the shared space among the Kizh, Serrano, Cahuilla, Rumsen Ohlone, and the Seño people. We acknowledge the spiritual connection and rights as the original stewards and traditional caretakers of this land. We thank them for their strength, perseverance, and resistance. We recognize that every member of this community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land ever since it was taken by the settlers to form the city we now live and work in. Consistent with our values of reparations, community, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible our relationship as settlers in relationship to California Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold ourselves and the organizations we work on behalf of more attuned to the needs of American Indian, Native American peoples where we live, work, and organize. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sandy. And we acknowledge all peoples this evening who've joined us. We're delighted. This is the 5th of 6 workshops. So welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here. Please put your name and affiliation and role in the chat. Over the last few months and over tonight and the next month, we'll have the opportunity to learn and share together in these workshops language acquisition, literacy development, dual language and multi-language learners 0 to 8 years of age. And you can see the workshops there. So we're on number 5, Reflection and Exploration of Responsive. So who is Peach? Peach stands for Partnerships for Education, Articulation and Coordination through Higher Education. We have a slide up for you to read. I'll give you everyone a moment just to read through our mission. Thank you. Peach has partnered with the Dr. Seuss Foundation, and I'm very privileged to be the principal investigator for this project. But with me, alongside me, are many people. Nancy Hurlbut, Barbara Rosner are both behind the scenes, preparing tech for us and making sure that we stay on track, and in charge of the recording and chat. We also have 4 presenters this evening. My colleagues are LaTanga, LaShawn, Joleen, and Ande. They'll be working with you over the next 2 hours. But very briefly, I'd like to start with this quotation. Please take a moment to read this quotation from the Guardian newspaper in London from 2 years ago. So within this context, we have a statement that we're using throughout our work with the Dr. Seuss Foundation. I'd like to read it now. Dr. Seuss books, such as Green Eggs and Ham and The Cat in the Hat, resonate for children and adults more than 30 years after the author's death in 1991. Theodor Seuss Geisel was born and raised in Springfield, Massachusetts. His books have been translated into many languages, including Braille, and are sold in over 100 countries. Dr. Seuss Enterprises have decided that 6 Dr. Seuss books are no longer to be published due to racist images and culturally insensitive content. Further, Dr. Seuss Enterprises has reported that an inclusive group of new authors and artists representing a diverse cross-section of the population will create a new series of children's books that include original stories inspired by original Dr. Seuss sketches from archives at the University of California here in San Diego. In this way, Geisel's legacy of motivating young readers, writers, and artists can continue with illustrated tales firmly focused in anti-bias and anti-racism going forward. We hope that you'll continue to work with us at Peach. If you're interested this evening, you'll perhaps join us for our 6th and final workshop next month. Meanwhile, I'm going to pass the reins to Ande, Joleen, LaTanga, and LaShawn. There are their photographs, so these are your facilitators this evening. There will be an opportunity to respond to some prompts in the chat box. You have a link there. And at the end of the session, I'll give you a little prompt now. Ande will remind you right at the end. We'll have some reflection prompts at the end of the session as we close toward 8 o'clock Pacific time. Have a wonderful evening. I'll be here with you, but I'll turn off my mic so that we can hear our facilitators. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for being here. My name is LaShawn Brinson, and I am full-time faculty department chair, child development at Los Angeles Southwest College. So I want to welcome you once again. And as we get started, we're just going to set some intentions for this particular session. So for session 5, our focus is to reflect and apply strategies that celebrate diverse languages, bringing into this session information from prior sessions. However, if this is your first time attending, we have opportunities tonight where we all share information, and we will revisit some of the topics that we have addressed earlier related to the homeschool connection strategies. As I look at the names and everyone, wherever you are, and exhale. And as we get started, just think about what your intentions are for this session. It can be to just be present. I know it's been a long, rainy day for many of us. Be willing to share information or just have an open mind. But this is how we would like to get our session started. And I will turn it over to Ande now.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we have a quote up on the screen. You take a look at it, and I'll give you a minute to, or a couple seconds to read it. But do we believe that reflective thought began when we found ourselves with an experience that raised some difficulty or a dilemma, which he referred to as felt difficulty? And from that experience, Dewey said that we set about reflecting on a problem as a result of that. And there were 5 steps to accomplishing that resolution. And the first one was disturbance, that something doesn't work. So first that identification. And then the second was the intellectualization. and definition of the problem, so to identify it as we reflect. And then third, studying the formation of a working solution. And 5 was the reasoning that came from that study. And then 4, I'm sorry. And then 5 was testing the action or the hypothesis that would lead then to a solution. So reflection is a genuine part of an authentic representation of how we solve problems and reflect back on our work that we're doing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Professor Joleen Voss Rodriguez. I'm keeping my camera off because my internet might be a little bit unstable here. So I'm going to talk about some of the myths that we reviewed in the prior session. So leading up to this 5th workshop, we had 4 other workshops, and we did talk about different types of myths that we might encounter in terms of what we've known about bilingual education or multilingual learners. And so this is just a little reflection. So there's a myth that's been out there that learning more than one language will delay learning, but we know that's not true. Developmental benefits include improved executive functioning and better working memory for bilingual students or multilingual students as well. The other myth is learning more than one language will delay learning English. And we also know this is not true. Children need a strong foundation in their home language as well as in English. We also have the myth that children will become confused if they're learning more than one language. And we know that this is a myth and that increased exposure to more than one language improves children's ability to discriminate between languages. Another myth is that full language immersion is best, that we have this monolingual brain. We know we don't have a monolingual brain. And in fact, there's something called translanguaging, and translanguaging, it really looks at language as a process for expression and meaning making rather than a tool for mastering the majority language, or mastering English, for example, in our country. So we don't have a monolingual brain. There's a myth that there's separate tracks also for languages, and children, they may mix languages at first, but they learn to code switch. It may take them a little longer to respond because they're developing 2 languages. Another myth is that home language support only functions to help children learn English. And again, we know that concepts in one language enhance learning in multiple languages. So we really want to value the linguistic assets of all children because they have a place in our classroom. So we've said this in early childhood a lot, that the child is the curriculum. And we know that if that curriculum should be based on what we know about children and the children in our care, we want to engage children's full linguistic repertoires. So not just English or not just their home language, but both languages. So if the child is the curriculum, if this is true, what does this mean in our daily classroom practices? And that's something that we're going to explore further tonight in this workshop.
So as we get started, we're going to first just reflect on this phrase or term, responsive curriculum. And so I want to just get input from everyone. What's the first thing that comes to mind, or what do we know? What do we think of when we hear responsive curriculum? And you can feel free to post in the chat or unmute, but let's see if we can just share out and see what comes to mind now regarding responsive curriculum. Thank you, Laura. So I see meeting each child where they are at their level, child-centered, holistic, meeting the individual needs of the child, so developmentally appropriate practices. Yes. Anything else anyone would like to share?
Would it also mean being mindful of, like how we started out this meeting, like racist material or stuff like that? All these years we didn't really read into all that, but now since we are aware, to be more aware of things like that, racist material.
Yes, definitely. I reflect on earlier teaching and from being a preschool teacher earlier on, and then becoming a college instructor and looking back, at some of my instructional practices and resources has been an interesting journey as you begin to pay more attention to what we are presenting in our classrooms with our children and our families. Thank you for sharing that. So I have more listen to children's needs of the child. So definitely we're connecting with responsive curriculum being really centered around the needs of the child, getting to know who they are and who their family is. Yes. Listening to them, their culture, background, adapting to the individual learner. So awesome. We are in the right spot. So yeah, so a part of this session, we will hope to build a repository of ideas and information that we will be able to share out with everyone when all of our resources are made available. So thank you so much for sharing in the chat, and we'll have opportunities to continue sharing as we move forward. Next slide. So responsive curriculum, just from looking at different, research articles and information, this is something that I found. Responsive curriculum is curriculum that is reflective of multiple aspects of a child or student's identity, including language and culture. And I put students, including adult learners. So depending on where what role you play, it's also a reflection of our adult learners as well. I try to take heed to this information and apply it in my college classrooms also. Responsive curriculum is flexible and adaptable to children's interests. So a lot of your responses in the chat was the child's needs and listening to the child. And so that's a connection with the children's interests. It's based on a teacher's observation, reflection, and planning. And I believe that was touched on in the chat too, looking at the families, the culture, the background, adapting to the individual learner. So that's a part of that observation, reflection, and planning. There are some important questions to ask when we're creating responsive learning environments. And the number one question is, who are our children? Who are our students? A lot of times thinking about my practicum students, when I'm getting them ready to go out to do their practicum, they don't really know their children right away. They don't know what they're stepping into. So a part of our earlier tasks are focused on building relationships and observing and connecting with the children and being able to come back to our seminar and have conversations about who are their children, who do they see in the classroom. Other questions is, what do the children see in their classrooms? And who do the children see in their classrooms, and what do the children see in their classrooms? And that's important as well, that the children can see themselves in their environment, see, representation of what is important to them and their worth, so they can see their worth in their environment. What do they see in their classrooms? And so when we talk more about the environment, we'll talk about materials and how the environment represents the families and the culture. What cultural and linguistic responsive, instructional, environmental, and family community supports are used in our classrooms? So that's a lot. Basically, how do we honor home language and how do we honor culture? So that's a basic way of paraphrasing that. And so that's where we're going to start. a lot when I was, just doing more research, just to have a better understanding of language and the impact and the value behind language and honoring children and families' language, I, just stumbled across so much information that speaks to how language is tied to children's identity, their value, their worth, the microaggressions within the communities that they have to endure and face with their families is linked to language. So how we value the language and teach and represent the cultures is extremely important and representative of their identities. Next slide. So to be more specific to language, we're going to look now at the linguistic responsive teachers. So culturally responsive and now more specifically linguistic responsive. Number one, the linguistic responsive teachers are familiar with children's linguistic and cultural backgrounds. So that goes hand in hand with what we talked about already with cultural responsive teaching. Number two, understand the language and vocabulary demands that support learning activities. And this where it gets, a little bit more fun for us as educators, because it forces us to dive into other areas of language that maybe we're not as familiar with or maybe not as comfortable with. And then number three, have the knowledge and skills necessary to implement appropriate scaffolding tools and strategies. And so how do we start? Where do we begin? When I was putting together information for this, I wanted to keep in mind my practicum students, novice teachers. There's so much information that they have to, pull together and step into the classroom and be teacher ready. I just thought about, well, how do they get started? How do we develop their skills and help them be able to scaffold and use tools and resources while at the same time learning about themselves, learning about their role as a teacher, but yet being a very important member in this child's educational journey. And so we're going to move on. But before we move on, I just want to take a quick pause and see if there's any questions or comments about any of the information that's been shared already. All right. Okay, so what we're going to see now is just some learning activities. So we're going to focus on the learning activities, and then we'll switch gears and move into talking about the environment and then the homeschool connection. So for learning activities that support multilingual learners, what we'll see in these next couple of slides is just traditional stuff. This is what we do as early childhood educators. It's what we do when we're teaching curriculum as college instructors, but we're looking at it more so from how we can ensure that we're embracing multilingual learners. And in following this approach and strategy, we're opening up the door for many opportunities for all children to engage in different languages, to hear different languages and speak different languages as they're learning in their educational environments. So here's just some learning support activities. So learn to use key phrases in home language of the children, and encourage children to speak to children who share their home language. So this is encouraging children to speak to each other. And that's the same for families as well. Basically, help children and families feel good about speaking and sharing their language and not feel like I have to speak English because I'm in this environment, but embrace the different languages by encouraging that interaction with each other. Encourage counting in multiple languages. And I have some just tools, things to show. And so I don't know if you can see me pinned, or if you can see me okay, or if you want to pin me from your screen or speaker screen. But these are just basic tools that you may have seen before. They may even have them at the 99-cent store and things like that. But these are measure up cups. So they're stackable cups. they have numbers, they have animals, but what I like about these is that they're in 3 languages. So there's English, there's Spanish, and there's French. And so for number 1, uno, one. And so as the children are engaging in play, or as you are engaging or with the children with different concepts, using different tools and materials to reinforce the different languages, especially as it relates to counting. And this is a good resource for doing that. It also says sing songs, chants, rhymes, and finger plays. And so we do this already. But sometimes really when we take the time out to find out the culture and background of our families, then it may take us into a different world of different language that we may not be as familiar with. So inviting the families in to help you make adjustments. So using the same resources we have, this is called 5 Little Ducks, and it's just basically a book of different nursery rhymes, peekaboo. There's one little, finger play, slowly, slowly, quickly, quickly, and just getting the words in the child's home language slowly and quickly. So the main words, the key concepts that we're trying to share and help our children embrace. And there's a question about the PowerPoint, and yes, in the chat. So include visuals or movements when introducing words in developmentally appropriate ways. So I found this fun set of cards. It's called Big Words flashcards. I've been using these basically ever since the start of the pandemic with my adult learners, trying to be creative on Zoom. But what they are big words, and they have images that goes with the words and fun ways to define, describe, pronounce, and use the words. So this one is smorgasbord. And what I did is, because I didn't have my co-teacher here with me, I used my little translation app in my phone, and it gave me sortido. And I may or may not be pronouncing it right, but given a translation for the word. And so when using images, pictures, visuals, to introduce words in developmentally appropriate ways, that's a good way. You're introducing the words, you're adding visuals, you're doing fun things with the words, and then using the words throughout the day, but also including the different languages. And I see in the chat, someone said, we have families help us by writing down words in their home language and how to pronounce them so we can say them correctly to support their child at school. Yes, that's always, especially those key words like the bathroom and, more food or, milk or whatever, things so that the child at least feels that they're getting their needs met with throughout the day. And then repeat new concepts or vocabulary frequently across multiple settings and content areas. And so using the concepts in more than one way. So yes, we can use words and introduce words and storybooks and finger plays, but also this is something I like because you can change these cards in here and you can add pictures and movement and different words in different languages. And you roll the die. There's 2 of them, or you can just use one. And whatever it lands on, you can tell the child that movement, and you can say it in different languages. So I wanted to just show things that we already have and we already do, but how do we strategize and come up with ideas to get started with incorporating multiple languages and making sure that our multilingual learners are benefiting from their experiences. Any questions or comments? And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So there are additional support activities, learning activities, provide ample opportunities to practice using new vocabulary. And that's something very important. I work with, I I keep mentioning my practicum students because I was thinking about them throughout this whole journey of preparing information. And they usually just, are a little stumped sometimes at knowing where to start and how to begin to incorporate all of everything that they've been learning when they go into the classroom. So one thing they struggle with is with vocabulary. And so they want to introduce the word and then they just leave it there in that one little moment or experience that they have with children. But reminding them to have, ample opportunities to read, to share the words throughout the day and engage the children in the language and new vocabulary. And now what we're doing is making sure that we're using those words in different languages as well. So not only focusing on the English language, but making sure we're reinforcing multiple languages in our classroom. Translating the foundational resources to home language. And that's what someone, Carrie Green, thank you. You were ahead of me on the slides. That's what Carrie put in the chat, having the families involved and helping you to get that foundational language translated. And so that you can share that with the children. One thing, when I was a preschool teacher, my favorite line was "Como se dice," and my children would just love, "Oh, teacher," and I was like, "How do you say it? Como se dice?" And that was my favorite phrase in Spanish to get the children engaged with helping me, and I'm helping them and the families as well. And so we had a really good team when it came to learning each other and learning how to communicate and engage with each other. And most importantly, respecting each other's languages. These are, let me show you what they are. It's called Search Wiz, if you can see. And they are images where you can have the child search for something, but what you have as a resource on the back is the word in multiple languages. And so again, just taking basic teaching strategies and applying, tools to help us scaffold and utilize different languages in our daily routine and activities with the children. And Alma added support activities. Yes, very important. So we want to be selective about books you read. And so I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, Hamida addressed that earlier, paying attention to the books that we're selecting and going through the books and looking beyond the title and what we believe the concept is about, but really reading the words and looking at the images. You would be amazed at some of the books in the past. There's one book called The Listening Walk. And I have a version of it, I forget what year it was published, but there's the father walking with the dog and the son. And the concept is a listening walk, all the things you can hear and listen to in the community when you're walking around. But in the book, the original version, the father is smoking a cigarette. And so I have the later version where the cigarette is gone. And now there's an even more updated version that includes a little bit more diversity as far as the images and everything. So we are definitely growing and changing, but we have to continue, especially as we are experiencing so, many things that's right in the forefront of our children and our families as it relates to race and culture and diversity and inequities and things like that. So make connections with learning centers and materials. So when we're having, just like with the counting, having materials, there's books, and then there's materials that you can have that align with the books. These are just stacking owls. Sorry about that. I'm sure that was loud. These are just stacking owls. And this is the book called Hoot. And so when you're reading the book, you're making those adjustments to the words, mentioning the words. Maybe it could be the colors, or it can be some of the key concepts. There's numbers in here. And while you're going through the book, you're using different languages as you're telling the story. And then you're adding materials where they can actually go to the classroom in the environment and see materials that align with it. And you will be amazed at how children, they will embrace the different languages because they're making connections when you read the story, and also making the connections with those materials. And Hilya added that part of our cultural survey for families includes asking what their favorite children's book is. That's awesome. Because that's one of the best ways to embrace their, for one, bringing their family and their something they value into the classroom, but then also embracing the different languages. And on that note, there's one book that's called Love is Powerful. So one reason why this book stood out, I haven't even read the book entirely. I was looking at the different images, but it's talking about people coming together to advocate for women's rights. And on one of the pages, and I thought, I don't know that I would even read the whole book, but in one of the pages they had where families are making their signs to go out to the community to advocate for women's rights. And so they have the signs in different languages. And so I was trying to look up what some of these languages are, and there's Swahili, there's Croatian, English, and Spanish. And so it has different words, different phrases that represent different cultures. But the main idea was that we are powerful, like we are powerful. And even in our own words, in our own languages, we are powerful. And so we thinking about selecting books and, what is the meaning behind the books and how are they best representing us in our cultures, I thought about that book. And surveying the families for just, as much as you can is important. There will be a resource at the end of the slides that links you to some different surveys for families. It's out of New York, but they have different surveys that they send home to families. And I also have some slides that I'll share with you when the resources are made available on the site, that if you are college instructors, they're good tools to use with your students to get them to look into books and see what is the value behind the books, how are families represented in the books. So to do that deeper dive of all the things that we're talking about, but your students could do that in your classroom environment if you are working with the adult learners. And then so we're gonna wrap this up and then invite you guys to actually have opportunities to share with each other. So aligning the activities with children's interests, support, reinforce, and extend the learning in English as well as in the child's home language, using language modeling strategies, and then use wait time and allow time for children to think and respond. And one that's not on here, because I just found it in the NACE, the Young Children's most recent Spring 23 journal, was using books without words even as a tool for the multi-languages in the classroom. So I thought that was a good idea, a good article, and I think I provided that resource for you guys as well. So before we move on and begin to do some work with each other, are there any questions that anyone have about any of the slides that were shared? All right. So here's what we're going to do next. You're going to go into breakout sessions for about 10 minutes. When you get into your breakout room, you want to select a timekeeper and a note taker. It could be the same person or two different people. And you want to invite everyone to share. There's going to be a Google Doc added to your the chat, and you want to add your notes in the Google Doc under your breakout group number. Okay, so these are questions to consider. What have you seen being done as it relates to learning activities that support multilingual learners? What have you implemented or tried? And what do you need to support multilingual learners? So what do you think you need in order to support multilingual learners? What have you tried? What do you implement on a regular basis, or what have you seen being done, but maybe you haven't tried it yet? So that's what we're going to do next. Are there any questions about what we are doing before you go off into your rooms? Okay. All right. So if you get to your rooms, you have any questions, need help, you can always click on the help and someone will come in and join you.
For some reason, Barb, the breakout room thing went in my, okay. Is everyone back now?
Not yet. Welcome back. As you're returning, just want to make sure that you are muted again. Welcome back. I just want to say thank you for engaging. I'm looking at the Google Doc. I still see some typing happening. Very good. Thank you so much. This is going to be a great resource for everyone. So we have just a couple of minutes before we move on to our next topic. So I just want to get just a couple of quick shares if anyone wants to unmute or post in the chat. And again, we do have the document that everyone has access to, so you get to see other input as well. But anybody want to share, unmute or chat?
I'm going to share one of the participants' ideas. I'm a coach and trainer, so I take other trainings to learn from participants, right? One of the most fabulous ideas that she gave was that she'll take pictures of the different activities, and I would love for her to speak up for herself if she will. Do you want to speak for yourself?
Sure.
Thank you. This is an amazing idea.
Thank you. We were talking about the challenge when little friends are new and they don't, they don't have really English yet, and we don't know their language very well, and we don't have aides that know the language very well. And so what has helped me support these children and families is I take pictures of us together throughout the day, enjoying a book or, doing activities, and I print them out and I give them the physical hard copy to take home to share with their family so that the parents can talk to their child about school, and the child can physically hold that picture and look at school and they can talk about it. I do send home digital photos and I text parents almost every day, but just there's something about giving a child that physical picture to hold on to reflect on, and it gives a tool for the parents to use to discuss school. And for me, it's worked really well to cut down on crying, and children feel a lot better. So
Yes. Thank you. Thank both of you for sharing. Laura, encouraging Carrie to share. Thank you. It reminds me, thanks. It reminds me a little bit of learning stories, or an element of learning stories when you think about the picture.
Social stories. Yes.
Yeah.
When you're giving social stories, when you're working with a language delayed or impaired child. Yes, that's exactly what I thought of.
Yes, yes. So awesome. Thank you. Just one last opportunity. Anyone wants to share before we move on? Did someone unmute?
I would like to share what we're sharing on group number 3, that they say that we share, you know, that on the group that say one share that teachers in their school
Mhm.
support different languages. They bring their multilingual language from home, and they when they read it, the story that they translate into different languages.
Mhm.
So, and they have different, you know, they have multicultural children and they have Korean children. So they invite their families to write, you know, on the wall. So
Mhm.
they have like, you know, by the end, they have different languages writing on the wall, you know, on the school.
Mhm.
So I think that was a really great idea. And then everybody else share, you know, like they have different children. They promote, you know, like pictures in the classroom. You know, the teachers use different photos or different activities, you know, to be created in the classroom. And one activity that was made to mention that we did a photo album for each child representing their family. So and then we made that album from the child. That was a plastic one. The supervisor buy one album for each child, and so each family put several pictures of the children, you know, with the family, with their culture, and then we put it on the bookshelf. So
Okay.
teachers were able to, children were able to share to each other. So that was really nice.
Yeah. Good idea. Good idea. Thank you all so much for sharing. So we're going to move on so we can go back and continue to share ideas. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Joleen.
Hi, everyone. I have my camera off just because my internet is a little wonky here and I'm running the slideshow. So, but we're going to go into environments now. So you guys shared a lot of great activities and ideas in the chat. And we know that you also have really wonderful ideas about environments, and we want to actually hear from you. So we're going to do the same format, but starting with the environments that support multilingual learners. One of the things is that we know that they are coming into a culture of a school, you know, and they have to learn the culture and interacting and using a language in which they don't have a lot of expertise and they're still learning, you know. So how can we build language and relational connections for them in the environment? That's something that's really important. And our group, our little team that's giving this presentation tonight, we are talking about, in preparation for this, we are talking about ECHRS, and we started talking about the, you know, the early childhood environmental rating scale. And we noticed that, you know, there's a section on diversity, but there's minimal information to support multilingual learners through the environment. And so, you know, a lot of times you'll go into a school and you'll see little plastic families or little plastic people, right? And so that is the that's one of the ways that people have brought diversity into classrooms. And so what I wanted to say here is, like, it's so much more than plastic people and posters, right? Starting with our own families. So when we're looking at diversity, we really want to honor and value our diverse families. And we also want to, you know, start with them, start with the families. So some of the ideas that were brought up in the workshop number 4 was talking about family photos. You know, framed family photos are always really nice to bring in. So the kids actually see their families within the classroom, but they're also seeing their classmates' families in the classroom. Another thing in LaTanga had showed us in the last workshop were the real people, the blocks, you know, with the children on them, or else block props that are the children. I have some pictures here. And it's funny because my son's preschool, they took blocks actually and put pictures of the children, the front of them and then their backside of them on the block. And he loved his block. That was him, his own block. But there's also in this pictures here on the bottom, they did something really interesting. They took pictures of the families. So there's like a mom holding a baby, and then there's like some different parents, and they cut them out. So then when the children are in the block area, not only are they can put themselves in the block area, but they can put their entire families in the block area, whatever they've built. So There's, also family books, family journals, and asking the parents and grandparents to come in to read. So we want to, we just really want to ensure that we provide those positive and salient representations of the families and their home languages, as well as their home culture. And so it's more than purchasing things at a school supply store. This little slide here, I'm really talking about, there's a story that really moved me at a workshop that I did with one of my colleagues. She's a center director at a university lab school, and she shared a story about a child who didn't eat very much at school. And this school has cooks on staff, so they serve hot lunch to the children. And so the teacher worried about this child. I'm calling her Amira here, but of course that's not her real name. And so the teachers worried that Amira did not eat much at school, and at home her parents had no problem with her eating habits. So the teacher asked the parents to share some recipes with the cooks at the school. And the first time they made a dish from her home, she walked into the school and in this excited voice said, "It smells like home," And so for her, that smell, those scents, that was this connection. And there's so much language in our recipes, right? Home language is found in words in a recipe. Home language is found in words used to describe the foods, the flavors, ingredients, spices, scents, and smells. You can do those little scent jars. Kids can create their own recipes and create a cookbook, classroom cookbook. So there's a lot of really neat ways that you can support even the scents from home. And then it looks and feels like home. So we always talk about, these home-like environments. We want these home-like environments. And on the left, you see this slide that's the typical dramatic play furniture that you might get from a school supplier. And so does this look like our children's homes? And not really, right? And then on the right, we see a photo of a child with her grandmother. And this is taken from a project called Abuelita's Kitchen, Mexican food stories. And I love this. I love this because it reminds me of, in Reggio Emilia, Italy, the Loris Malaguzzi International Center has a food atelier. And so the kids actually do these deep project work around food. And so I thought this was kind of a neat resource that we could use. So Abuelita's Kitchen, what it is La Plaza Cocina. It's the first museum and educational site in Los Angeles, and it's devoted to telling the Mesoamerican story through the abuelitas, I can say this, right? Abuelitas that are represented in their kitchens or their cocinas. So it's a resource, and we'll put that link in, it's in our resources later, but there's beautiful pictures, wonderful stories about the families, and just sharing, like I said, their food stories, which I thought for some of you that might be interested in doing a project in your classroom, like grandma or grandpa's kitchen, what's in their kitchen. So in California, our multilingual learners, they have connections with these rich and diverse kitchens and home lives. And it also reminds me of when I went to a study tour in Reggio Emilia, Italy. I was there, and this is many years ago, but we got to go into the classrooms, and the American teachers were super fascinated with the dramatic play centers. Like, we got to see all the centers, we got to see the blocks, and the whole experience is very fascinating. But we got stuck in the dramatic play area, and because we just kept looking at all the different materials that were in this dramatic play center that you don't see in the United States. So we saw these, they had pasta makers and pasta tools. They had packaging from the various food products that were common in their home. So the environmental print from these products was different from our own. And it made us all, we all stood there and had this moment of reflection upon how our primary culture, that's what you typically see in American dramatic play centers. We typically see one primary culture represented in our dramatic play centers. But what about all the other cultures and all the other languages? And so home language, it's found in those objects and the items that are used in the home. Home language is found in the packaging, instead of a Cheerio box, what else could you see? What other kinds of products? So, asking parents to bring in empty boxes or products, from home, kitchen utensils like the molcajete. Again, in Reggio, we also saw espresso machines, because if you know Italians, coffee is very important to them. So they had little espresso machines, cups in like packages of beans, coffee beans, in their dramatic play centers. So I was like, what are we missing in ours? I mean, there must be things that aren't there in our centers. So looking at different kinds of decor, there's textures that can be found in the home, and these all have words. So there's different words that they use in learning those words. So learning more, I know that when we're learning language of our children, we'll learn like the basic languages, the please, the thank yous. But just like LaShawn was saying, and you're like, como se dice, you're asking, how do you say that for all these different things? So there's other words like spoon and fork and knife. I put up a little chart for the Tagalog utensil. My husband's Filipino, and so my kids know a lot of non-English words for typical things around the house. And so I think that it's really important for us to kind of learn those things as well. So I want to, one more slide here. And then music, it sounds like home. So as you can tell, I'm going through all the senses here. So it feels like home, looks like home, smells like home, sounds like home. Sounds like home, when we're looking at the home language, is also found in music and musical instruments. I know a lot of you probably do this. You probably do songs and finger plays from the home language. When I worked with children, we used to let the kids bring in tapes. I mean, I'm back from the tape era with, when I first worked with kids, but we'd bring in tapes. And so they could go over to the listening center and put in different tapes and CDs and stuff, music from home. And so they could hear different songs from the home on their own privately, but then also you can share that out in the classroom. So family sharing of music, having families come in, maybe they play different instruments. I've thought about this a lot in again, my husband's family. Everybody has the ukulele. Every birthday, there's a ukulele being played. So now my kids really wanted to learn a ukulele. So that's the type of things that, you can bring in and have the family share their expertise. So, and I know you guys have, this is just kind of, we're just kind of throwing out a few ideas here for you to think about, because I know you guys have so many wonderful ideas that you're doing in your programs or that you've seen. And so again, we're going to have an opportunity. Oops, sorry, I muted myself there. Again, we're going to have an opportunity to let you guys meet together in your breakouts, and you're going to talk about environments. So just what we were talking about, and you can think about the senses, think about the senses and what have you seen, what have you implemented or tried? And then what do you need to support multilingual learners? I mean, there are materials that we might not have. And again, we ask families for those things, but maybe you guys have other resources that you could bring in and support children. And even, like I said, that the cocina, abuelita's cocina, so that the different kinds of resources for projects. Some of you do deep dives and do more projects with children. So Barb's going to set us up for our breakouts, and we'll have 10 minutes again to do that. And just on that same Google Doc that you were using, go ahead and just continue right below where you were writing in some ideas. You guys can continue to write in the ideas below it. So it's the same format that we did before. With a note taker and everyone sharing notes. So Barb's going to send you into, unless you guys had any, I should have asked if anybody had any questions. We can do that at the end. Thank you. As you're coming, as you're coming back, if there's some of you that want to add a couple of things in the chat while you're coming back, or if you want to unmute yourself and we can start talking about, we'll just have a couple minutes, maybe a group that hasn't talked yet. Come share with us some of the things that you were talking about. We saw lots of chatting going on, so we're curious to hear some of the ideas that we haven't heard about before, something unique or interesting that you want to share.
Hi, I'm
I
Rosa.
wanted to, oh, sorry, I'll let you share first.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Carrie. You go first.
Okay, I just wanted to share something. This was along a different line, but through parent communication. I suggested using a Google Voice number. I got one and it was really, really helpful. It's just an app, it's free. You put it on your cell phone and you can text the parents and send them pictures. The communication has really super improved by using text, because a lot of parents feel comfortable on text, right? And if they don't speak English, they can hit Google Translate or whatever. But yeah, Google Voice makes it so you don't have to give out your personal number. It's just the Google Voice number. So anyway, that is very helpful as a teacher.
Great, thank you so much. Does anybody else want to share something really quick about adding into the environment? Anything to add into the environment before we move to the next section?
I did. Like everyone has like a family tree, and someone said that they have it. Mi familia, my family, in Chinese and Korean. Like actually, the words up on that wall. You know, that makes it bold. It makes it like, hey, that's. Even though in our company, the parents are still not allowed to come inside, but when they are, they'll be able to see it. And
Right.
so I like that idea.
That's great. Please be sure to add to the Google Doc. Some of the groups didn't. I know you guys were all talking. If you can add some of your ideas, because we want to build this Google Doc, and we want to we're going to keep this. You're going to be able to have this, but it's also we're going to add it into our. We're going to have a Canvas page where we collect all the information. So along with the slideshow will also be this great Google Doc, because you guys are experts. You guys have such wonderful ideas, and we learn best from one another. So be sure you guys to take a minute and add to that. I want to move on to our next group because we are strapped a little for time here. So I'm going to hand it over to LaTanga now. Hold on, LaTanga. For some reason, it's not. There we go.
Okay, perfect. So yes, everyone, my name is LaTanga Hardy. I'm the director of the Child Development Center at LA Trade Tech College. And as the director of a child care program, I found that working with families can be both incredibly rewarding and it can also be challenging. On the one hand, there's a widespread recognition that family engagement is the key to supporting children's success. And there's great reward in building thriving partnerships with families. On the other hand, challenges often arise regarding how to successfully engage families. And how do we do that? We start with honoring the first teachers, and that is the child's parents or major caregivers. So I want to give you a little time to think back about your parent or major caregiver. And quickly in the chat, if you see me looking down, because I'm on my cell phone too to see the chat, think of something that you learned from your family member or your major caregiver or parent. What's something that you learned? So for example, for me, I learned how to make preserves. I was raised by my grandmother, and I learned how to make preserves. What is something, let's put it in the chat. What's something that you learned from your family or your major caregiver? I know if you see me going down, just looking down because I'm trying to see the chat. Farming, sewing, dumplings, tamales. Oh, I love tamales. Crocheting, sew, learning how to sew, knit, making jelly, church hymns, and making pralines. Oh, I love pralines. So you'll see that all of these is like wonderful. So our parents our major caregivers are our first teachers, and all of that. Tortillas at my chosen family growing up, cooking, right? More people are writing cooking, cooking. Chili rellenos, rellenos. Having fun getting messy. You can't beat that. Having fun getting messy. I enjoyed that one because I was raised in a house where we're one of those old house, well, not old, but I guess it was, where you couldn't go in the living room, and the living room was for show, right? So we could go in the den and we could play in other rooms, but we couldn't go in the living room. It was just for show or for when grandma had guests over, right? Seeing so many things in the chat. Now, also people are saying that was my grandmother's house also. So we learned so much from our parents, our major caregiver. So we have to remember as educators that although we might have what we consider the book learning, parents have so much that they are giving to their child or the children that are in their care, and they are the child's first teacher. So we must always honor the parents, honor the parents, and know that they are the child's first teacher. So sometimes barriers can get in the way of family engagement, and that can leave families' expertise and contributions unrecognized and untapped by schools. Parents have such a wealth of knowledge, and we have to tap into the resources that they have. And sometimes we have to help them identify, because sometimes they're like, oh, I don't have much to share, but they have so much wealth of knowledge. And I'm sure if I can call on any of you, you can share information that you've learned from your parents, right? That you've learned from parents, that children that you care for. You've learned so much, whether it be some words in their home language, whether it be some cooking experiment, whether it be just how to treat and how they like to be addressed, right? So as educators, it's our job to communicate to all families that we want to draw on their valuable assets, and they are valuable assets. Those assets can greatly contribute to the child's development and learning. And so I put on the slide about the first generation immigrants who may have entered the school without prior, what we call academic schooling, but they also provide a wealth of knowledge, right? And I use the instance of my grandmother. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. My grandfather had a 6th grade education, and my grandmother had 8th grade education and 6th grade education. My grandfather only went to school to 6th grade. But what I learned from them was so valuable. And so if we would discount, if we would discount our children's major caregiver, we're discounting that child. So I think it's so important to honor that home language and honor what that child brings into the classroom and look at the great assets that they bring to the classroom, right? So successfully engaging families requires understanding what each of us bring to interactions with family members. So before we can form successful partnerships, we must fully understand the unique lenses that we see the world through, that we as the educators see the world through, including our own individual biases and ways of interacting with those around us. And that includes how we interact with our parents. Next slide, please. As the family is the child's first and most important teacher, the partnership that we establish with families can affect the family and the child in the short term and years to come. We know that, but parent engagement, we hear so much about parent engagement, and we know that when parents are involved, it's more successful for the child, the family, the whole education system, right? When we're working in partnership for the best betterment of that child. So we must be knowledgeable about the cultural and linguistic competent practices at the classroom level that support each family. What does each family bring to the classroom? One of the things we talked about in our previous workshop was save information you collect from each student and their family and use it to tailor culturally responsive practices to that student's needs. Just like we make lesson plans with certain students in mind and individualize that lesson plan, so must we individualize how we communicate with parents, right? Because it's not a one size fits all when you're working with families. Families are diverse, just like our children are diverse, and they bring with them different skill sets, and they bring with them different ways of the way they would like to be communicated to and with, rather. So it's very important. Ask families to identify their preferred communication method and use methods to ensure equal access for all. We heard about the picture of people taking photos, right? Communicating with families. We know that people are communicating families with like Learning Genie. They're communicating families with other resources and the way they are communicating with families and sharing what's going on inside the classroom with families, and also welcoming families. Have you ever been somewhere where you didn't feel welcome? And so think back, have you ever been somewhere where you didn't feel welcome? And how did that make you feel? So how do we change that for the school environment? Are we making it a welcoming place for all children? Something to think about. We want to involve students and families in a project that addresses a problem in the school community. That's a wonderful way to get parents involved. When we're all working on a group project, right, together, and everyone has something they can contribute. One of our big fundraisers at our school, and it could be a fundraiser, it could be planning, it could be collecting books, it could be a myriad of ideas. But one of our big fundraisers, our only really big fundraiser at my school, is we do a triathlon. And we have parents come out to the triathlon, and the children ride their bike on campus around this big square. And it's a way of bridging the gap and bringing families together, because everybody feels like they can be a part of that. Now, for some families, they can't take off in the middle of the day, right, to do that. So what are the ways can we engage families? So we've had movie nights, right, where we've had families. We've had grandparents' tea. So for Grandparents' Day, they'll have a tea. Or we'll showcase art. We've showcased art, and we have, instead of wine and cheese, we have apple juice with cheese and crackers, and the students are able to showcase their artwork, right? Or it could be STEM or STEAM. And so that's a way that we get families into the school. And you want to make those first school engagements where it's not so high where I've got to put, as a parent, that I have to put so much out, but it's just opening and welcoming in. Of course, you always have those parents that want to jump in and what do you need me to do? And what do you need me to sign up for? Those parents, but you also want to make it as less stressful as possible. As a previous Head Start teacher, we know that our parents had to do in-kind. I was a Head Start teacher back in the 90s. And so one of the parents worked. And so one of the things we would do for her hours donating to our program was she would cut out items in the home. So say we were doing something with boats or something or whatever, and she would cut out, or shamrocks, since St. Patrick's Day just passed, and she would cut out those items at home and would give her a sample and give her the green paper, for example, and she would do those things, cut it out at home, where she still felt a part of the school environment. So it's really important that we look at the strengths that parents bring to them. So we need to adopt a strength-based approach, that every family has unique strengths, and we need to focus on the strengths, moving away from what families are lacking or missing, to what families need to thrive and achieve. What can our program offer that parents can thrive and achieve? Just as we do, just as I stated previously, just as we do individual lesson plans to meet students' needs, we must also individualize support and accommodation to support families' meaningful participation. And we want it to be meaningful. We want them to get something out of it, right? We want it to be impactful for their child and our school program. Next slide, please. So one of the things we got to do is we need to set our communication goals. How do we want to communicate with families, right? And what's our goal? Just like we set goals at the yearly goals of we want to achieve X, Y, or Z, we want to set our communication goals. How do we want to communicate with families, and how many more families did we want to reach than we have in the past? So that's why it's important to collect that data, right, on our communication with families. We want to make sure that we're welcoming all families to the environment. And we want to develop a relationship of mutual trust. If we don't have trust, right, we don't have anything. And sometimes we have to be aware that trust might take time. So I always tell my students, and especially my parents, at the beginning of the school year, we will have parents, you know, I take them at 12 months. So we have parents crying, right? Children crying and parents crying. And we'll have parents who will come back and say, come to the front desk and want to look inside the classroom, right? Because my college, I'm on a college campus. So parents will come between classes to peek in to check on their child. And at the beginning of the school year in August. But by September, October, I don't have hardly any parents that stop by because they're building that trust with us, right? Building that trust. Remember, parents are giving you their child. What's more important than your child, right? And so for those hours that you have them, they have to build that trust. So it's important that we have that homeschool connection. So families of English language learners have a legal right to access school documents and meetings in their home language. And so we talked about, I think what was stated previously, someone talked about using Google Translate, right? So there's a lot of avenues where you can have items translated for you. Explain to families that they have the right to access information in their home language. Be clear that you value their language and see it as an asset for their child. Be clear that you value their language and see it as an asset for their child. So we talked in a previous workshop about learning some of those key words that we all need to know when working with someone who doesn't know the English language and the language that's spoken in the school. It doesn't have to be English, the language that's spoken in the school. So it's really important that we get those keywords from the parents, you know, bathroom, eating, water, things of that sort, and that we start to bridge that communication gap, right? So respect the dignity and preference of each family and make an effort to learn about the structure, the culture, the language and customs and beliefs of each family. Acknowledge parents' child rearing practices, values, and their right to make decisions for their child. That's always a sticky one because we have to acknowledge the parents' child rearing practices, values, and their right to make decisions for their child because this is their child. Create environments that welcome families. Engage in parent meetings. And some of the things we've done with parent meetings is we wish upon a star. And that's where parents write their wishes. You have parent-teacher conference and wish upon a star, their hopes for their child. If you have a parent meeting about behavior issues. So, and we can start it off by ever felt like a broken record? And that way parents can discuss why do they think kids need repetition or reminding of things. Yeah. Broken record, right? Talk about the myths of the perfect parent and what they thought parenting would be like before becoming a parent, right? Because we all have those ideas about what it was like. What would we like to be a parent before you became one, right? And then once you become one, it becomes totally different. We want to make, we have to revisit our communication strategies, revise according to the new information, what we sense is working and what is not working in our programs when working with families. Seek input from families' preference and their communication styles and how they want to be communicated to. Revisit effectiveness of ongoing communication. As an ECE organization become more, slow down, LaTanga. As the ECE organization become more diverse, staff needs to look at how we engage families in comprehensive, systemic ways that we are being respectful and responsive to each family's needs. Just like we make individualized lesson plans for children, individualized plans for parents. Next slide. So we got to pick one school, pick one tool. It's so much to do. You want to pick one tool that you're going to focus on for your program. You want to personalize it. You want to set the tone at the beginning of school. You want to build relationship and share accountability for how you communicate. Invite parents to be partners, empower parents, and provide actionable information. So I know we're running close to time. So I want to give you time in your breakout groups. And we're going to go into our breakout groups and talk about homeschool connection. That homeschool connection and how we can be supportive. And I'll turn it over to Barb to put us in our breakout groups for our last breakout session.
I think we're going to do 5 minutes because of time, because we only have 10 minutes left for our whole presentation. So we're going to do a 5-minute breakout group. Okay.
Welcome back. So can I have 2 people come off mute and we just have enough time to maybe 1 or 2 great ideas that you'd like to share out about your homeschool connection? Anyone have any great ideas to share about that homeschool connection?
We still have a couple more rooms coming in. I think they may all be here now.
Learning Genie seems to be across all people that I was reading on that document, trying to figure out what I was supposed to be. I didn't know this even as a coach. I thank you for educating me that it translates both ways.
Yeah.
I just really like that idea because not only does it add that communication, but it shares the language for the educator as well.
Yes, thank you. It does. Excellent. Someone
It
else?
also we're able to send photos of what their children did during that day, so the parents are able to see it, and the parents are also able to take pictures of their children in their environment and send it to us so we can see it.
Yeah. Great. Great ideas you guys have shared. Thank you so much. And so right now, I think we're going to start our waterfall, correct, Joleen?
Yeah, so LaShawn, you want to prompt them?
Sure. Now well, first, just thank everyone so much for being here and contributing to the document and contributing, verbally in the chat. We really appreciate the engagement. So one thing we want to do is commit to a practice. Just think about any of the strategies from tonight, any of the new information people have been sharing with each other. What is at least one thing you are willing to commit to do? And so what we want you to do is put it in the chat, but don't press enter right away. We're going to tell you when to press enter so we can just see all of your ideas, your commitments fall into the chat at the same time. So we're going to take about 30 seconds just to type in the chat what you are willing to commit to, but hold off on pressing enter until we say now, okay? Okay. Just do 10 seconds, finish up the last word. I guess I need that 10 seconds. And now. Let's press enter.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Oh, great, you guys. This is wonderful.
families. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Andy?
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you all for coming tonight and for sharing this time with us and for your contributions to this special time that we spent together. I also want to remind you that the post workshop reflection is a big part for us to get feedback from you. So if you would please take a few moments to go on and do that. Barbara put that in the chat so you can access that. And we want to thank you very much for joining us and hope you all have a great week and you stay nice and dry. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We love